Hello, my name is Abraham Kline, and I would like to start a brand new segment or show, series, whatever you want to call it, on my channel called Heroes of the Faith. Now, this is part of the Christian part of the channel, and it's all about the idea of basically what the title says, Heroes of the Faith. Those who have influenced us for the cause of Christ. It's kind of like the testimonial series that we have, except instead of giving testimony of how God changed our lives, it's a story of how God used other people to influence us in our lives. And of course, many times when we give our testimonies, sometimes there were people along the way who influenced us, whether it was a preacher who preached the night that we got saved, or a friend or a loved one or a Sunday school teacher or a parent who was very instrumental in us coming to the Lord. And that's basically what this series is going to be about. And I would like to kick it off, if you will. We've already done a couple of interviews with different people about Heroes of the Faith, but I would like to kick it off as far as launching it onto the channel with one of my Heroes of the Faith. I'm going to, over the time, I think I'm going to give more than just one, because it's possible to have more than one hero of the faith in this life, because obviously there's many different people that influence us for the cause of Christ, for those of us who are Christians. And one person that's definitely been an influence in my life is, and this is not to be what you call stereotypical, but my dad. My dad, when I think about him, he was an influence that wasn't necessarily an influence early on, as far as someone that I looked up to as a spiritual leader. But over time, I began to truly appreciate his servitude and who he was as a person that served God. He was not a dynamic person. He was not a overbearing type of person. He was very much always in the shadows. He liked to sing, and he would do that from time to time. But he was more or less a servant, him and my mom. And maybe on another episode I could talk about her. But my dad was very instrumental in showing me what service is like, and being that integral part that, isn't in the forefront, isn't on the big stage. And by that I mean my dad was a doorkeeper. My dad was the person that locked up the church at the end of the night. And that was basically his job for many, many years, up until an accident that ended up causing his health to greatly deteriorate. But that was my dad. He locked up the church. And it was always a drag, really, growing up, where we were typically, we weren't usually early for church. A lot of times we'd be late for church. But even regardless of how late we got to church, we were always the last people to leave. And why was that? Because Dad always locked up the church, and Pastor always relied on him. And many times, Pastor has talked about him, says, "I miss Kenny." That's my dad's name. How he misses Kenny, and how that, he doesn't have anybody that's a reliable person that can do that anymore. And of course, we have people that do that now, but it's not that one person. My dad was that one person that could always be relied on to lock up the church. And, and that's the way the church works. There's usually that person that does, a specific thing. That's what they're known for. They're the person that cleans the church, or they're the person, that teaches this Sunday school. They're known for that. And my dad was the guy that locked up the doors at the end of the night. And, there's a verse that talks about being a doorkeeper in the house of the Lord. And if there was ever a verse that could be considered my dad's servant verse or calling verse, that was his, because that's what he did. And he did other things too. Again, like I said, he sang. He loved the song "Till the Storm Passes By," "If I Could Hear My Mother Pray Again," and other songs. And I just love him. And I think if there was anything that inspired me to want to sing, it was him, because he loved to sing. And remember, even as a little boy, he brought me over to his little tape recorder and had me record singing on his tape, his little recording machine that he had at the time. and got me interested in singing because he liked to sing and instilled that in me. And as far as evangelism is concerned, he used to actually call people up. He'd get the phone book out and call people up, and if I could say, he would witness to them over the phone, say, "Hi, I'm Ken Kline." And I could imagine, he wasn't a dynamic guy. He wasn't a salesman kind of guy, not really outgoing, and so I can imagine he sounded very dry over the phone. But that's what he'd do. He'd get on the phone, he'd witness to people, and tell people about Jesus. And that is a hero of the faith. That is someone who's truly a servant of God in so many different ways. And I know it's not what we do, it's what's in our heart. And I believe his heart was truly in it. And, I'm so thankful that God put him in my life. And of course, I think I didn't really have a choice. He was my dad. So I guess regardless of what he was like, he was going to be in my life anyway. But I'm thankful that I have had the opportunity to be his son, and he is definitely a hero of the faith, and I give God the glory for how God used him over the years. And again, that's what it's all about. At the end of the day, it's not so much about them, the person themselves, but it's about the God that used them. And hopefully you can look at people like this, like my dad, and like others that you can look to in your life that maybe have inspired you, that you could look at and say that God used them in my life. God brought them into my life and used them instrumentally, and you can thank God that they were willing to be a servant for the cause of Christ. And I'm thankful for people like my dad who were just a servant. My dad wasn't a preacher. God called me to preach. But my dad was never a preacher. He never once got up and preached, and I don't know what it would have been like him preaching. But God never called him to preach. God never, called him to teach Sunday school. God never called him to do anything like that. But he was a witness. He loved to sing, and he was a doorkeeper. And I'll tell you what, that made him an amazing hero of the faith for me. Over time, I hope we can do more videos like this, where we we also have other people tell you about their heroes of the faith. And of course, I don't know how many people are going to watch this, but if you are watching this and you'd like to comment, maybe tell me about some of your heroes of the faith, and maybe even send me details, and maybe I'll interview you about your hero of the faith, or maybe even get a testimony, depending on who you are, about being, about your salvation. So anyway, I hope this has been a blessing. Thank you for watching.